Mikel Arteta is turning Arsenal into a monster. From struggling in the pits of mid-table to challenging for a title, it is clear to see that Arteta's plan for success has worked very well. Today I'm going to go through Mikel Arteta's Arsenal project and how close he is to creating a dynasty and complete domination for Arsenal Football Club. December 20th, 2019 was when the Spaniard took charge of his first match as a newly appointed Arsenal manager, following the sacking of Unai Emery. A point was earned. Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang fired in a second-half equaliser away at Bournemouth to kickstart Arteta's reign. Dark days then followed with two successive 8th-place Premier League finishes before Arteta eventually dragged the Gunners up the table. Phase 1 was getting rid of the egos. Arteta was met with the toxic dressing room who had played their part in getting Emery the sack after just 18 months at the helm, as well as underachieving themselves on the pitch with little sign of getting up off the canvas. Arteta said post-Bournemouth, in terms of attitude, desire and commitment, it was better than I expected. The likes of Socrates, David Luiz, Mesut Ozil and captain Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang all started on his managerial debut and were known sources of dressing room tension and aggravation during the early days. It was much the same when he looked at his bench on the south coast. Nicolas Pepe, Shkodran Mustafi and Matteo Guendouzi. One by one, they were all shipped out, making way for a young, talented and committed group willing to trust the process and play the Arteta way no matter what. Arteta also used it as a clever power play, especially with Aubameyang, exiling the Gabon international for his lack of professionalism and leadership and stripping him of the armband, even when some members of the Arsenal hierarchy disagreed. You can look to Mikel Arteta's early press conferences as a guide to what he wanted from his players. His ideas around culture off the pitch quickly became clear. He was asked in his first press conference what he wanted to change about the club. He said, "We have to build a culture that has to sustain the rest. If we don't have the right culture in difficult moments, the tree is going to shake. So my job is to convince everybody, this is how you're going to live. And if you are going to be a part of this organization, it has to be in his terms and this way." When we look at the footballing style of Mikel Arteta and move away from the sort of theme and culture he wanted to adopt at the club, it was clear his desire was to have inverted fullbacks. And this was clear at the Vitality Stadium in 2019. That day and in the weeks that followed, Maitland-Niles played at right back and drifted into central areas. The academy graduate was not a certain starter, so that aspect of Arsenal's play was not consistent, but it became so after the arrivals of Takahiro Tomiyasu, Ben White and Alexander Zinchenko, who all give Arteta flexibility in those areas, as well as Julian Timber too, who has been out injured this season. The now familiar 4-2-3-1 setup is Arteta's most common formation, and despite there always being an understanding that a 4-3-3 shape was the end goal, he has seen the need to experiment with a 3-man defence at times too. The 3-4-3 was a means to an end during the 2020 FA Cup winning campaign. Soaking up pressure and catching teams on the break worked well at first, but quickly became stale. A lack of creativity made Arsenal one-paced and predictable on the ball, too easy to play against. This coincided with their worst league run under Arteta, as they went 7 games without a win, form that may have resulted in a sacking at another club. If anything, that period was proof Arsenal wanted Arteta for the long haul, which became evident with the 3-year deal he signed in May 2022. Boxing Day 2019 may have been the beginning of his journey, but Boxing Day 2020 arguably holds greater importance. Change was needed, and the introduction of Emil Smith-Rowe as the number 10 in a 4-2-3-1 provided pivotal. Not only did Arsenal have a link between midfield and attack, but the speed of attacks also grew quicker, thanks to Smith-Rowe's ability to move the ball forward with limited touches. Martin Odegaard's arrival on loan weeks later helped maintain that creativity. And that moves on to our next point in this Arteta rebuild to make Arsenal a dynasty. Squad strength and depth was an issue when Arteta walked through the door. On the bench at Bournemouth, he did not even have a backup striker to call upon. Aubameyang and Lacazette both started, while Pepe and 19-year-old Smith-Rowe at the time were the only substitute attacking options. It was a similar story in other areas. In his first summer window in 2020, Arteta began the gradual revamp. Centre-back Gabriel and midfielder Thomas Partey remain vital figures in the team now. The summer after, in came Ben White, Tomiyasu, Ramsdale and Odegaard. And by January 2023, Arteta welcomed the kinds of players in Gabriel Jesus, Alexander Zinchenko, Leandro Trossard, Declan Rice, Jorginho, Timber, Raya. All players which fit very well with his philosophy of football, but fit very well in the way he wants his players to identify on the pitch. All of them are leaders. All of them play with the idea of control. There is no more clownery. Everybody looks down to business. And that is what Arteta needed in order to create this Arsenal team, therefore create future domination. Although players are vital to a team's success, we often ignore the role of coaches and specific coaches too. Start with Nicholas Hover, who Arteta made Guardiola bring to Manchester City. Guardiola was understood to have made his coldness towards set pieces clear when he first arrived at the club, but it was a club decision to hire a set piece coach and he became on board with it. Nicholas Hover's work ethic was picked up on. With him being one of the first people into the training ground, he would spend hours in his office, located in the analyst area, poring over video. Things really started to click for Hover when he came over to Arsenal after Mikel Arteta became our manager. He has been a revolution, and Arsenal look like scoring from every set piece. It wouldn't be ridiculous to say that every corner is basically a penalty now. Arsenal have been so efficient from set pieces. Goals per 100 set pieces in the Premier League since 2021-22, Arsenal topped that chart. Some have even gone as far to say that his impact as a set-piece coach is reminiscent of Rory Delap and the throw-in. You just can't explain how key he has been for our title charge this season and last season too. But let's not also forget about Carlos Cuesta, Tekas Guru and Stevenberg, who have been crucial to Arteta's Arsenal side. And if you haven't noticed, this is essentially Arteta trying to dominate every single aspect of football. He wants to dominate dribbling, he wants to dominate set pieces, he wants to dominate transitions, he wants to dominate the opposition till suffocation. And he's willing to invest in individual people to come into the club and work on those specific areas. There was actually an Athletic article that came out earlier this week talking about a manager who had experienced Arteta's Arsenal at the Emirates this season. Many think it was Eddie Howe, and basically what he said was that he felt trapped. As soon as he came to the Arsenal and to the Emirates, his team just couldn't get out in the first 25 minutes. And that was true. His coaching staff didn't even see a solution. And he said that he's always seen a solution with other teams, but with Arsenal, he just felt so pegged in. That's down to Mikel Arteta's attention to detail and how he values different aspects of the game. Let's now look at the last phase of this Arteta rebuild, which is going to make Arsenal create a dynasty. We've seen Manchester City invest ridiculous amounts of money into young talent, and Arsenal have started doing that. We've signed the young lad from Wolves, Braden Clark, and we're looking for young talent again in different areas. This is how you stay on the top. You make sure every single part of the club has so much quality and that the players can just slot in easily. We've seen Oscar Bob do it, Cole Palmer from the academy, Phil Foden, and now it's our turn. Once we fully have our academy revamped, Arteta's rebuild will be complete and the dynasty will have been created.